And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Rant Network. It is our Wednesday edition, and this is a very, very special edition of the Rant Network. My name is David Solomon. I'm here in Montreal, Canada, with my dear friend of many years and colleague down in Sunny Isles, Florida. And today we are going to have a very special interview with forensic engineer Rick de la Guardia in a minute. But for those of you who are new to our podcasts, our video podcasts, we are live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We touch on the subjects that the media doesn't want to talk about, that people are afraid to talk about in today's day and age. And we like to poke at stuff that needs attention. A couple of weeks ago, we actually started talking about Surfside, the situation in Florida, this unfortunate disaster. And we started to talk about really our experiences, Stuart being a condo owner, myself knowing many condo owners, and their challenges and what they're faced. And as a result, we were approached by some people to talk about, go into more and more detail about what happened and how this can be prevented. So Stuart, why don't you just give us a quick brief and some thank yous going forward?
You know, I got to first say thank you to a guy named David Diaz, who is good friends with Rick de la Guardia, and told me about him and what he has done, and then caught a couple of his CNN and other news network broadcasts. And if you don't know Mr. de la Guardia, you will after this 45 minutes, because I guess the mainstream media likes to get their question answered and doesn't want to hear necessarily the expanded answer. In this special edition, we're going to allow Mr. de la Guardia to say everything and not just the 2-second answer. I think that everyone around the world who lives in a condo or an apartment building really want to hear, especially, in this case, people in Surfside or South Florida, where this building did a tragic ending. When you have 94 lost souls and that count going up, it's sad. I mean, you cannot have blame today, but we can definitely talk about a lot of the speculative reasons. And Mr. de la Guardia and David, you're going to read his resume and Dave, why don't you tell us all about Mr. de la Guardia? What are his background, his credentials, so everyone hears?
Well, I got to tell you, this is the gentleman that we're very proud to have on as our guest. He has over 25 years of experience in hazard mitigation, assessment, forensic investigations, and inspections of building structures and components in Florida. Peer-reviewed many designs of exterior building product submittals. Investigated, made damage assessments of structures in Florida and Alabama as part of expert witness work. He performed numerous structural assessments on older structures as it relates to concrete restoration. Served on advisory committees for the American Society of Civil Engineers and has performed hundreds of special investigations. It is our pleasure to welcome forensic engineer to our show, Mr. Rick de la Guardia. And Rick, let me start by saying, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. And really where I want to start this conversation, and I think where everybody wants to know is, really the first question is, what do you think caused this unfortunate incident at Surfside?
Well, the cause, in my opinion, and I certainly don't want to speculate as to the specific engineering analysis. We have experts that are doing that. But the cause, in my opinion, was a catastrophic column failure. Now, I want to distinguish cause from trigger. That may not have been the trigger for the column failure. A column would fail by being overloaded, by being weakened, by many other aspects of the site. So, in my opinion, the cause was catastrophic column failure. We don't know what the trigger was. The trigger could have been subsidence. The trigger could have been work on the building next door. The trigger could have been the pool deck. But the area of the pool deck, I want to explain to everybody that it's a structural slab. Slabs do not hold up buildings. Slabs are supported on top of beams. Beams are supported on columns. Columns are what support the building. So the report in 2018 that I read gave very good, it was a very detailed report, enough to tell the association we need immediate action. It did not, however, portend to immediate failure of the building, nor do, in my opinion, do I believe the engineer in 2018 felt that the building was in critical condition that could cause a collapse. Having said that, there are many possible reasons. There was a study in 2020 based in the 1990s where there was subsidence in the area, so the soil was settling faster. There was water main work being done next door. There's certainly people who are speculating. I don't necessarily agree with that. People who are speculating about design or construction flaws. Everybody is taking out every bit of information and jumping to conclusions. My wish is that we respect the process, that we let the expert do their work, and that we be responsible in our reporting.
Again, you talk about catastrophic column failure, and then we talk about slabs and beams. And again, a lot of people listening today, it's just a lot of concrete. And so I guess, even I get a little lost. So the big columns in some instances are these big round things that we might see in the garage. We might see in the, utility rooms of a condo building. And the beams would be the structures that sit on these columns. Would that be the good definition? And the slab sits on top of the beams.
Exactly. And I'm not to say that the slab is not important. The slab certainly and beams do support the columns. But what I saw in the video of the collapse was the building went straight down. I don't know if you guys saw or our listeners saw the controlled demolition of the other portion. It looked almost eerily similar to the actual collapse. It went straight down. It looked like it was a controlled demolition. What they do in a controlled demolition is they put explosives on the strongest columns. They don't put explosives on the beams or the slabs necessarily. They put them on the columns to bring the building straight down. And in my opinion, that's what I saw. I did study the structural plans. I'm not going to be venturing a guess on any design or construction flaws, but I did notice that the column spacing and the column sizes from the garage and the lobby level, there was a drastic change in the spacing and size starting at level 2. That's just my own observation. It's something where, based on the video, would lead me to investigate.
So if we were looking at this tragedy, and I think we can all agree that this is an overtly exceptional situation. This is not something that is commonplace. But for those people who are listening, who live in condos, who are this, how do we help people to avoid a potential tragedy of this kind as we go forward?
Well, I certainly believe, in my opinion, that this was a situation that could be unique to this building. I say unique to this building should give people some reassurances that if their buildings are properly maintained, they have nothing to worry about, in my opinion. But this building, there's records, extensive records of even more information coming to light a couple of days ago from the city of Surfside that back in the 1990s, as early as the 1990s, there was work being done on that structural slab. And then certainly 2018, and then pictures from underneath the pool in 2021. So this was like a perfect storm of failures, in my opinion. But I would reassure people, absent sudden soil failure that gives no signs or indications, such as a sinkhole or some other form of underground erosion, I wouldn't be concerned living in a high rise. Certainly, this has been the only building, to my knowledge, in the United States that's ever fallen that hasn't been terrorism or natural disaster. So I would not be so concerned now. However, having said that, if it is determined to be a design or construction flaw, there is cause for concern for the sister building, the North Tower, that presumably had the same contractor, developer, and design. I know there are experts right now looking at that, and I've from what I've read, they see nothing overtly concerning. Certainly, I've seen reports where that tower was much better maintained, had in my opinion, a much better HOA and board that insisted on doing proper repairs. As a matter of fact, there was a interview with the president of that association that showed the exact areas that were of concern in the 2018 report, and they looked to be in very good shape. I say that not having been there, but there was certainly not ponding water. There was not exposed spalling or rebar or reinforcement that like we saw on the other ones. So that should give the people in the North Tower some confidence.
You know, Rick, I just want to bring up something because you touched on it a little bit about HOA. I mean, there is a process in South Florida called a 40-year recertification, which is then followed by a 50, a 60, a 70 every 10 years. And, you know, we talk about, and you've mentioned, you know, an HOA. HOA stands for Homeowners Association. If you don't live in one or know of one, they're boards that are elected by primarily owners of the building. And that composition, like in my building that I live in, it's someone's son who never had a job and is running a $3.5 million, $4 million budget. So again, the qualifications of that HOA or that homeowners association is something that we're going to talk about a little later. But Rick, can you tell us about what's wrong with the 40-year recertification process and how that coveted certificate isn't necessarily a get out of free jail card?
Yeah, and I certainly do not want to, and I know I've been speaking quite a bit about HOAs, that they have too much power. I certainly don't intend to lump them all in one pile. There are good HOAs, the North Tower being an example. I've had a few people reach out to me, and they're doing their 40-year early, and they're insisting that their owners pay for the repair. So there are a lot of good HOAs out there. The problem is that the process does not properly vet, in my opinion, 40-year professionals. The process gives too much responsibility and power to the HOA board. The maintenance of the buildings are usually supervised by individuals that, in my opinion, are not qualified to look at structural and electrical defects as they come along. So I've been trying to refine my message, and I came up with PPM, power, process, and maintenance. Remove the power from the associations with respect to life safety decisions on the buildings. Improve the 40-year recertification process, and insist and require on proper periodic maintenance. That, in my opinion, is all three of those, in my opinion, led to this disaster. Each one of those could have potentially avoided it.
So in other words, too many underqualified engineering firms underbidding, right? Because remember, they want the business, right?
Right.
And you also had said earlier, right, to us, the qualified person, the engineer who's coming up with what is in that 40-year plan, right?
Right. And again, I
that?
do not want to speak ill of my profession, but there are individuals, there are bad apples in all professions that they pride themselves in lowering the cost for a 40-year, not doing these extensive repairs. And the process that I believe is flawed in that the city doesn't have a standardized plan. The county has guidelines for a 40-year recertification, but the county's not going to go out there. It's the city in which the building resides that those officials there are going to be responsible for the 40-year. I've even heard news reports that hundreds of buildings have totally bypassed their 40-year and didn't even do it. So now the building departments are going back and looking into their records and citing the ones that haven't. But it's a flawed process. Another part of the flaw of the process is that the city will ask an engineer to assume 100% responsibility. They won't even do a single inspection. The city will just go out there once the association has hired an engineer. And don't get me started on that process, because the HOAs hire an engineer, but if they don't like the cost, they hire another one. If they don't like the report, they sit on it. If they don't want to do the work, they don't do the work. So it's an issue, whereas the city gives too much autonomous power to the 40-year professionals, and there's really not a vetted list. There are many qualified 40-year professionals. Unfortunately, as you stated, some of these engineers will underbid and make deals to not repair this, to not look into this, to not force this. In my opinion, that's a problem.
So, Rick, if we were to kind of play a little bit of revisionist history for just a second, and we were to go back to 2018, what would you have advised any board, and not specifically Surfside, but the building in Surfside, but any other HOA? What do? You get a report like this. What should they have done?
Here's my opinion. Okay, my opinion is that I'm not going to go back and discuss it specifically to Surfside,
No.
but in
Right.
my opinion, if a law or a regulation is in place that as soon as you hire as an HOA an engineer to do an assessment, which it was in 2018, that report gets immediately and concurrently distributed to the city so they can look at it. So the condo board cannot sit on it for 3 years. So that report in 2018 told me this building requires immediate action. If you do not take care of this, the damage would exacerbate. That was very clear. Action needed to be taken immediately. Now, the distinction is that if the engineer thought that the building was in danger of collapse, he would have, I certainly would have, highlighted the area of major structural damage. I would have requested shoring of the area in question. I would have requested further immediate investigation. So that's what leads me to believe I had to struggle to look for in that report where it said major structural damage. I'd make its own paragraph. I'd bold it. I'd make recommendations. So in 2018, immediate action needed to be taken. Maybe the structural slab was not the reason, but if they started the investigation, maybe you would have disclosed the actual cause of the building. Certainly, it goes back to now we're hearing in 1990s that area or an area similar, and that's way too early in my opinion to have having structural cracks. So I'm sure that will be investigated by the professionals.
You know, Rick, you just touched on a topic about the cities that don't get these 40-year reports. And then when they get them, do they have people that are actually going to read them and follow up at the time? But let's say like a building that has 400 units in it, that study is done and the board holds it from the rest of the owners. And all the owners here is 10 million, 15 million, whatever, using any building as an example. So do you think maybe the cities and the county and the state has a flawed process that engineering report should be delivered to every homeowner so they actually understand these costs and how they relate to supporting this building? Your thoughts?
That's a legal question, not an engineering question, but I will opine.
Okay.
I believe there's a law that all condo association board meetings and committee meetings should be made available to all the owners. So, but unfortunately, you're right. Some of them don't. Some of them do not make that information available. Some of them pride themselves in keeping it to themselves to avoid any issues. So, in my opinion, and I stated as other interviews, is that the state needs to take control, because right now, I'll give you an example. After Hurricane Andrew, Miami-Dade and Broward County were affected. Certainly South-Dade by the storm, and then the code changed. But what happened was the code changed for Miami-Dade and Broward County. It did not change for the other parts of the state. There was a major pushback, and what we have today, in essence, are two building codes disguised as one. So we still have a dysfunctional process, in my opinion. I don't want to get into that. That's a topic for another day. But the Florida Building Code includes a section that's called the High Velocity Hurricane Zone that are based on the lessons learned from Hurricane Andrew that only apply to Miami-Dade and Broward counties. So this similarly with the 40-year recertification, Miami-Dade and Broward has one. No other city requires one. So I think the state needs to take control and give a standardized 40-year or 30-year or whatever. By the way, I believe 40 years is a good a time. My opinion is that you don't have to wait or you should not wait to 40 years. You have to have proper maintenance as it comes along. That is achieved by having your day-to-day maintenance individuals be a real engineering department. Having an engineer with a degree, a person with a degree in engineering, being responsible for the daily maintenance of certainly our high-rise buildings, 60 feet or higher, which are called threshold buildings. Certainly, in my opinion, if we had a structural, electrical, knowledgeable individual, some of these repairs may have been done sooner.
It's interesting. We're kind of getting some comments here, and let me just remind everybody who just joined us maybe a little bit late, is we're not speculating on the particulars of the one incident. We're talking about preventative measures going forward. We're talking about the Rick's experience in this area, having done hundreds and hundreds of these types of inspections and reviews and what have you. So we're just talking about where the future needs to be. So if we're talking to a homeowners association, and we know that whether you're in Florida or anywhere in the country, it's of varying ages. How does a homeowners association know, and how can they evaluate that what they're receiving is reasonable? I mean, they don't have the experience as you speculated. So what can they do? What would you tell a homeowners association to do in order to validate that the costs being presented for them and the ideas being presented for them are valid?
Hire a qualified professional. Simple. Not only that, I wouldn't recommend, I would require. For a 40-year recertification, I would require that they consult a qualified professional to review the assessment and work with you on the budget. Now, I know people are talking about money. Certainly, it's very cost effective. There may be laws about funding reserves that may be changed. So I'm not here to talk about the money aspect. I'm here to talk about the engineering aspect. But certainly, I would require that once it comes around for the 40-year recertification, that you hire a qualified professional and take their advice. I know that current law, the boards have all the power, and they can vote to do, who to hire, whether to do it, how much to pay, when to do it. They have all the power right now with respect to 40-year recertification. So, and the city is not involved. The city waits for the engineer to give them the go-ahead. And like I said before, if the condo association doesn't like a report, they'll sit on it for 3 years, or they'll hire another engineer that doesn't force them to do the roof or the railings or this. I have a personal experience. I'm speaking to you as an engineer who's an expert in the field, whose very own building is going through a 40-year recertification. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm not happy with the process. It's a personal issue. I'm going to deal with it internally, but I have experience. And I say hire a qualified engineer. But even then, if you advise the board, sometimes they don't take your advice. And I'm not going to say anything more about that. But even if you have qualified individuals providing advice, the board is free not to accept it.
Rick, we got a quick question from someone who's actually watching. First name is Russ. He goes, are you familiar with Sunny Isles? And again, Rick, you can't speak to anything specifically, but this gentleman's talking specifically about Sunny Isles Beach, which is a neighboring city just to your north. Any safety concerns? Like, for example, there was a meeting last night, and the building department person, a guy named Clay, went on the record on Zoom saying, they did an immediate inspection of buildings where they wrote out tons of violations on these buildings in Sunny Isles, and says, yes, you can use that for your 50-year inspection. Like, they're dishing out this as like, no problem, you'll be okay. Is there something to be concerned about in Sunny Isles with the building departments? I know, again, I'm not asking a personal question, your legal opinion, you haven't been there, but in general, this is someone who lives in Sunny Isles with this.
Yeah. Again, I can't opine on something that I'm not familiar with, and I certainly know the area, but I will provide this answer for you. There are problems in all municipalities with respect to the 40-year recertification. You have to understand that building officials aren't necessarily engineers. Building officials, when it's something that's complicated, they ask for a special inspection, or in this case, a qualified 40-year professional. Some engineers in my opinion, are not qualified to be performing structural reviews of high-rise buildings. But again, the process allows you that if you have a PE behind your name, you can do whatever you want, in essence. You have to be qualified, in my opinion, for high-rise construction, for the higher level of structural awareness that is required. And unfortunately, some engineers will take the job, not having the qualifications, basing it on lowering your cost. They'll pride themselves in, hey, I can save you 20%, 30%, 40% than X engineer that may have the qualifications. So I can't speak specifically to Sunny Isles, but I can speak in general. In my opinion, if after 25 years of working in the plans review, in the certification, in the inspections, there's flaws in a lot of the building departments. And I certainly, if I were you living in Sunny Isles, I would request, if your building is older than 40, can I see a copy of my 40 year? See who the professional was that signed it. See his qualifications and experience. Ask the board for the any structural assessments and repair or maintenance logs. That's what I would do.
Amazing. So to that end, let me ask you, it's one of the things that came up at speculation, which I thought was off base, was to try to lay blame on the developer. Now, once the building is sold, the units are sold, really, is it the developer's responsible? Is it the owner's responsible? Where does the developer fit into this equation, if at all?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. In my opinion, this had nothing to do with the developer. In my opinion, why do I say that? The developers build a building. Typically, after the building is done, it gets transferred over to a homeowners association. At that time, typically, an engineer goes through it with a fine-tooth comb. They're called condo commandos. That's all they do. They wait till the building gets developed and transfers over ownership to the owners, and then they go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Now, mind you, this was back in the 80s, but I'm pretty sure that building went through a review after it was transferred over, because that's your due diligence when you buy any property. You have an engineer review it. So that's the time to go after the developer. In my opinion, in this case, it's all on the 40-year process. The HOAs, the engineers, the maintenance people. That's where, in my opinion, this issue could have been mitigated.
So let me ask you one quick follow-up to that then. I'm sorry, Stuart, but like to that end, so could we agree that we talk about buildings that was built 40 years ago, but today, the buildings, the code, they must have been updated. So if someone is looking to buy today a building that was less than 10 years old, are they as worried?
Again, absent design flaw or construction flaw, I
Sure.
wouldn't be worried. I just asked for the building maintenance records, any repairs that were done, any code violations. Certainly do your due diligence. Some realtors request, whenever you're going to buy a condo that's older, some realtors request a freedom of information as far as has this building undergone or is in the process of undergoing a 40-year recertification. So I think that's good due diligence.
You know, Rick, I'm going to bring in someone's question that we got over here. But I mean, in Sunny Isles Beach, I mean, just so you know, I mean, I went and I requested, like, all the buildings in Sunny Isles were all inspected on June 29th. And our building has a violation, which was dated 6/29. They redated it 7/6, right? And so when I looked at this and I knew about this, I requested the city for a copy of their inspection. Okay. Number one, I just got it today. That's like almost 2 weeks after the fact. And the building did actually put it on the website because of pressure from the building, but the building doesn't operate. And so I'm going to put this question on here. You know, this question comes from, someone who obviously lives at Winston Tower 400. You know, if the HOA takes responsibility for the structure or health of the building without an engineering involvement, they're a bunch of amateurs. So how do we actually what is the process? If you were to say, I can write the rules, what would you force a city, a county, and a state to do to remove the fraud that may exist in this process and allow people to know what's right and wrong as a homeowner? Like, so we don't live in fear.
Right. The very first step is the state, in my opinion, has to set a standardized procedure and guidelines for 40-year recertification of buildings. Step one. Step two, make sure you have a vetted list of qualified 40-year professionals, that you look into their qualifications and make sure that they are qualified. Not only that, I have experience with, and it's allowed by the code, that the engineer that has the qualifications sends his representatives to the field. But in instances where you have threshold buildings that you're investigating, 30-story, 40-story buildings, and in my opinion, it should be the qualified professional being in the field, certainly not his designated representatives that may have no experience in structural or qualifications in structural. That's two. The third thing that I would do is I would require that at the instant that you file for a 40-year assessment, that report be sent directly to the city concurrently, so that the city and the board are both aware of the condition of the building, and that the city can enforce some sort of timeline for the repairs. I forget what, 3 or 4. The next step that I would recommend is that you take away the power of the HOAs with respect to life safety decisions of the building. They can pick the color, they can pick the pool rules, but they can't pick the structural repairs that are done or not done. They can't choose the engineer based on budgetary constraints. So that's what I would do to remediate that. And the last thing that I would do is make sure that every threshold building has an individual with a degree in engineering, knowledgeable with structural and electrical, so that he can take care of these issues as they come along, and not wait until a 40-year recertification. That's what I would implement.
Right. But what about the 50-year and the 60-year?
Same process.
Same process.
The 50 and the 60 is just an extension of the 40. Exactly the same process. Just make sure that another thing I would add. Okay, let's not wait 40. Let's not do an extensive 40-year recertification. But let's say every 20 years, you do a structural assessment. You do an electrical assessment. You just check the columns, the electrical, make sure that you are not in any violation of current code. Because you have to understand another thing, that the buildings are built in the 80s. They're designed to the code at the time. They're held to bear to the code at the time the building was permitted, not to current code. Now, if something is a life safety issue, then all bets are off. You have to meet current code. So what I would do is I would implement also maybe, I think 10 years is a little too early, but possibly at the 20, 30, and 20 and 30 year, you do a structural and electrical assessment.
Folks, for those who join us late, we're here with Mr. Rick de la Guardia, forensic engineer, who's giving us his opinions and his insight into going forward. We're not really talking about this current tragedy in particular. We're really looking at what really needs to be helpful to help homeowners and condos, whatever. And Rick, we're already 33 minutes into this conversation, and we got like people going back and forth. But the question I'm going to throw at you is it safe to live in all of these luxury condos, these high-rise condos, these apartment buildings? And we're seeing, especially in your neck of the woods, the highest percentage of condo development in the country is happening in your neck of the woods. Would you tell people it's safe?
In my opinion, absent a design or construction flaw, it is very safe to live in a high-rise in Miami.
Don't you live in a condo yourself? Do you not?
Yeah, you have to make sure that it's properly maintained, that you have a responsible HOA, and that they care more about the safety of the building than the budget. But in essence, yeah, I tell my wife, my wife is concerned. I'm concerned. So it's an issue where, okay, maybe a building's not going to collapse, but if you don't maintain the building, maybe a beam collapses and kills one person in the car. Maybe a balcony collapses and kills 2 person on the balcony. One life loss is too much. So yes, we've only had one building collapse in the United States in this manner, but no loss of life is acceptable. And you can have a balcony collapses and dies, and 3 or 4 people dies is just as tragic.
So Rick, Rick, just I may Stuart, I'm sorry, but so Rick, before we create some sort of panic, what should the amateur look for? What should the amateur eye be looking for in their garage, in their pool area, in their building? Because the last thing any HOA is going to want is to get fielded with all these things that have absolutely nothing to do with it. And I've heard these already before. They see a little crack in the wallpaper and they think the building's coming down. That's not reality. So what can you tell amateurs who are not engineers what to look for?
I would tell the amateurs not to post any pictures or raise concerns in their building. I would tell the amateurs to take a picture, consult with a qualified professional. There was a story the other day that caused major concern, and it caused the city to come out in alarm because a resident took a picture of something that turned out to be an expansion joint that appeared to be a very large crack. So I would not advise the owners, amateur sleuths, to be posting and making your neighbors nervous. If you are concerned, talk it over with a qualified professional. Have them review the site. Talk it over with your board. Hopefully, your board is knowledgeable enough to consult with a professional. That's my opinion.
I just received an email that included this, Rick. I'm putting it on the screen. Here's what the city of Sunny Isles did. And I'm not picking on Sunny Isles, but I live there. And so this person who's watching sent this list of violations, right? And this is what I guess they posted online on their building. And as I scrolled down, because I looked at this, I then saw pictures that looked like this. Rick, you get a warning from the city that's now 47 years old on this building. And then you see pictures like this. I'm frightened when I look at this, and I don't know how to tell or respond to this viewer, what to do, because they're saying in their message to me, their HOA is ignoring the warning letters. This is done from their 29th inspection, and they feel totally helpless because the city of Sunny Isles says they're helpless, according to Mayor Budd. And they're also saying that their city councilman says they're helpless. So what do we do? What do we tell them to do?
Some of those pictures are concerning. Concrete is designed to give you warnings, right? Concrete, the buildings are designed, and certainly steel is designed to yield before it fails. However, concrete will give you warnings in the signs of cracks. So obviously, cracks in concrete are very concerning. They merit further investigation, but they do not all pretend to be a major issue. You have the concrete columns that are covered over in stucco, so it could be just superficial cracks that you're seeing. Concrete has built-in safety factors, and they have cover that's not structural, but there to protect the steel reinforcement from corrosion. So there's lots of things that you can do. If you see something like that, you inform you discuss it with a qualified professional. You bring it to the immediate attention of your building manager. Make sure that you have the board's attention. If you don't have the board's attention, then you certainly could request a review from the city. But there's going to be a lot of investigations on parking garages and columns and spalling. Not all of them pretend to be major issues.
Rick, I know we've covered a lot of subjects. Do you have any, final thoughts, anything else that you wish to add for the viewers today? Anything else you wanted to share with them?
Yeah, in closing, the only reason that I'm speaking to the media, to any and all who will listen, is to raise awareness of what, in my opinion, is a flawed process, and in my humble opinion, we can do to fix it. So what I'd like to see is action taken on this. I'm not an attorney, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've already seen that attorneys are gathering to discuss changing condo laws. But some of the firms that I'm seeing that are part of this are the very firms that protect the HOAs. So kind of wolf protecting the hen house. I don't know. I don't want to step out of bounds, but it's something that concerns me. I want to see real action taken to honor the souls lost here and to prevent this from happening again. PPM, I'll just repeat that. Power, process, and maintenance. Remove the power from the HOAs with respect to life safety decisions of their owners. Improve the process and require proper, timely building maintenance. I'd end on that note.
Rick, again, I want to thank you for giving us 40 minutes of your time. And I got to be honest with you. I don't think we've even touched the surface of this topic. And I don't think that even our random questions that we came up with, which bounced around a lot, because again, we're being asked questions in private messages while we're doing this. We've put up there for everyone to know Rick's Facebook, his Twitter, his LinkedIn. If you fail to contact him, reach out to us. Rick, I'd love to have you back another time. I'd love for more of this to be understood. As we're watching the remediation of what was once the Champlain Tower, of which in 2018, if they would have addressed the problem and not looked at the dollar amount, may have had a much different look today. So I want to
or if they would have had the right, as Rick said, the right guidance with the right engineer, the PPM and what have you. Absolutely. But again, we're not here to speculate on what.
No.
I want to clarify something. I'm not giving an opinion on the specific engineer at Surfside. I've read his report. It was a very good report back in 2018. I'm speaking about certain 40-year professionals in general. Certainly, I am willing to say that in 2018, immediate action needed to be taken by the board.
And Rick, I just want to say everything in this broadcast is opinion. It's not based off of any single building. It's not about any single column. It's not about any single developer.
It's about your experience, Rick, and your knowledge and your background. And we do appreciate you sharing all of your insights.
I appreciate you guys.
Go ahead.
I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'll be glad to come back whenever you guys want.
Again, my name is Stuart Brisgell. I am one of the partners at the Rant Network with David Solomon. I would like to, again, thank and applaud Rick de la Guardia on giving us his time, being so open and honest with his credentials. And unfortunately, as we end this broadcast, to have the memories of those over 100 souls that have either been found or we're still looking for. On behalf of the Rant Network and my partner, David, thank you for tuning into our broadcast, and we look forward to seeing you this Friday at noon. Rick, any last words? Say goodbye.
PPM.
I love it. Thank you. David?
Thank you all very much. Have yourself a good day, and everyone,